So we are very excited to be here today to talk about all kinds of queer shit, and we decided that the theme of the day was gay denim. So you're welcome. You can see to my right, I have Mohera, like Shira with a Mo, and down below I have Caira, like Cairo with an A. So here we are today to talk about CompHet, purity culture, growing up with religious and conservative households, as well as in conservative and religious areas, and for them, of course, being women of color, growing up in these areas and being queer. I'm so excited. Before we get into it and I hand it off to my guests, I'm going to do a quick definition of CompHet for those who may not know, and to set the stage for today. So, compulsive heterosexuality, CompHet, is the idea that heterosexuality is assumed and enforced by a patriarchal and heteronormative society. In this theory, heterosexuality is seen as able to be adopted by people regardless of their personal sexual orientation. So we can see this appear in things like conversion therapy, where people think that you just need to want to be straight bad enough and then you can be. Heterosexuality is socially promoted as the natural state of both sexes, and deviation is seen as unfavorable. So the term was popularized by Adrienne Rich in her 1980 essay titled Compulsory Heterosexuality and Lesbian Existence. Some other examples of how this is achieved, and there's literally countless examples, and we'll probably bump into some today, but you can think of things like how we consider someone a virgin until they've had penis and vagina sex, right? Or we hear that like gay sex isn't real sex. Claiming a woman's lesbianism or bisexuality is just a phase, or sexualizing it in a way that devalues it, like saying that it's hot and it's sexy, but not taking it seriously as an actual sexual and romantic orientation. You'll hear things like people saying she just needs to meet the right man, and honestly, everything that fundamental religions teach essentially enforces CompHet. And also how we focus on reproduction in a lot of spaces when we talk about sex, that's also very CompHet oriented. I also wanted to say, I pulled this from an article, but to understand the complexity of compulsory heterosexuality, several scholars have pointed out the importance of the impact of this construct on the different effects of all populations, including minoritized people. In No More Secrets, No More Lies, African American History and Compulsory Heterosexuality, Maddie Eudora Richardson discusses the additional complexities faced by Black women in terms of forced compulsory heterosexuality. Eudora Richardson points out any divergences from social norms of marriage, domesticity, and the nuclear family have brought serious accusations of savagery, pathology, and deviance upon Black people. She argues that as a group, this is already stigmatized in multiple ways. Black women face additional pressures, both from the Black and white communities, towards heteronormativity. Divergences from heterosexuality place Black women in particular risk of physical harm or social exile. And then the last little note my queer ass wants to make is to emphasize, as this also came up in my podcast episode with Everett, when we talked about, we talked a lot about gender and sexuality. And as Everett pointed out, when you heterosexualize a space, which is kind of the opposite of queering a space, usually within that, there's also cis sexism as well. There's a lot of things at play, but cis sexism is one of the things. So I want to point out that with CompHet, I would say there's such a thing as like comp cis as well, where cis sexism, cis normativity is also compulsory and assumed in these spaces as well. So that's all I have to say. What a mouthful. So I'm going to kick it off to Mohera to let us know her thoughts, because I know she and I have had many offline conversations about CompHet and her experience as a bisexual queer queen. So Mo, why don't you let us know your thoughts about this?
Yeah, so my journey to bisexuality has been long and complicated, to say the least. Yeah, so I think kind of to start off, for me, a really, really big part of, my kind of experience with like discovering like later in my life. So I'm 22, and I came out as bisexual last year. So, I've kind of like a newly discovered bisexual myself. So like somebody who kind of came out like a little bit later in life, for me, like the biggest thing, first of all, was my upbringing with particularly my mother. So my mom and I have a pretty tumultuous relationship. She is a bit like, so she's a narcissist, and she's also pretty emotionally abusive, and that's kind of been a way throughout like my life. And one of the biggest things that she kind of instilled in me was that other women were my competition. So I was always compared to other women, especially like to my own mom. Like she would always talk about how like she was very desirable, and like when I was in school growing up, like I was not desirable like at all. Like literally a guy would not even high five me, let alone like have interest in me. And of course, like I'm from the South, so I was born and raised in Tennessee, and you can imagine like what that was like for me. And so I just kind of, over time, I think I just subconsciously developed this like hatred towards women, because I was like, well, I always get compared to other women, and I'm always told how like I'm less than other women, and all these other women are wanted by men and I'm not wanted by men. So I think like subconsciously, I just really didn't like other women. And I also had that thing in my ear, like with my mom being like, oh, I just never got along with other women. I was always like with the guys. I was like one of the guys. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, I guess like women are just trash then. I don't know. Which was obviously like really detrimental to like my relationships with women, like growing up, obviously. So that was a huge part of why I really struggled with like even thinking about like having some kind of a romantic or sexual interest in women like in the first place. And obviously for me being a woman of color, I really wanted that to be like desired by a white man. Like that was just a thing. I was like, oh, if I can just like achieve that, then like that will be like, oh yes, like I'll have won in life, like to have like a white guy want me. Which
does your mom have like, would your mom also see that as an achievement?
I think for her, it was just like about the fact of like just desirability in general, like this idea of having men want you, like the men find you attractive, and there were always like things like, especially she was very like hyper feminine with me. So it would just like make me as girly and as frilly as possible. Like my hair used to be super, super long because, she would always like equate me with like a flower in a garden. She'd be like, people love to see beautiful flowers in gardens. And so you are like that flower.
Sorry.
I know it's so bad. It's so bad. I know, like I can laugh about it now, but I'm like, ooh, the trauma. Like, hey, like.
So you like literally should be picked. Is the goal.
Yeah, like when people like walk by you, they should feel like, wow, what a beautiful woman. Like. I know, it's so bad. And so I was like, oh, okay, I guess like that's how I should be then. Right? I know everybody in the comments is like, holy fuck. I'm like, I know, sis, I know.
Yeah, you're like, buckle in, that's not even the worst of it.
So that was like huge for me growing up. And then I remember getting to like, middle school, high school, and especially in high school, like there were just a lot, like obviously, so for me growing up in the South, it's all like preppy, white, conservative girls whose like daddies own like the local golf course and stuff like that. And those were the, those were the women who were just like seen as like, oh my God, they're just like the epitome of like beauty and femininity and stuff like that. But they were all like really fucking terrible people. And it used to drive me nuts because I was like, I don't understand what everybody sees in them. Like they're really mean and like not good people. And so I even kind of like further developed this kind of like frustration with women because I was like, I don't understand why people like want all these like really mean and hateful women. even though like the guys would be like terrible and absolute like worthless trash too, but then that's like misogyny, right? Like, oh, we're just taught like we need to respect, like, oh, we need to respect men, and like being desired by men is like the best thing that you can achieve in life, even though they're like literal trash and are like men ain't shit, like, right?
Mo, I feel like you're holding back, and I really want you to feel like you can just be honest and let it out, girl.
I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Men are the human equivalent of C's get degrees.
Basically, yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Like, they don't have to try or do anything in life, and they can just coast by, and then somehow, like, everyone will want them, and you're just like, really?
The bar for men is like in hell, so
It's
it can do the bare
so low,
like,
so low. Like, the bare minimum?
Oh
Lower,
my God.
lower.
I'm dead. I was just watching the show I was telling you about, and this white guy was talking to this queer black person, and he was like, I've had a really hard life. I was poor growing up. I grew up in the projects, and like everything I've done, nothing was handed to me. I've had to work for, and I was like, the caucasity of the situation. Like, you are talking to a visibly queer black person, and you're just telling them like how incredibly hard your life was, and I'm like, whew.
Sounds about white.
Yeah.
Yes. You're just like, the audacity of like cishet white men is just like, what?
Yeah, it's like literally you were handed the land that you're standing on. Like, you were handed everything. How do you not know that?
Let's start there.
Anyway, yeah, let's start there. Anyway, so Caira, did you want to jump in? I'm sure you have a million thoughts.
So many things. Everything that you said, Mohera, like, yes, same. I, too, live in Tennessee, and also I grew up Christian, so there's that whole thing. The, like, evangelical way of, like, okay, like, you need to be pure, you need to be this and this and XYZ for these men, and, like, your future husband, so, like, having premarital sex, it's like, oh, you're cheating on your future husband, which is, like, what the fuck? Like, I'm not married, like, what? Also, what the fuck are they doing out here? Like, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, that and just being desirable, like, oh my goodness. And the hyper femininity, like, the dresses and the socks with, I mean, from day one. I mean, I was in pageants, you know, when I was little, and thankfully they, like, you know, stop that shit as I got older, but, you know, it's like, who said I wanted to do this? So, like, total lack of consent, obviously, but like you said, seeing women as competition, so, like, not even being able to build, like, real friendships and relationships with women, and, like, if I can't see them as friends, certainly not as a romantic partner, like, it just wasn't even an option in my head, which, again, retweet, like, I just came out, like, later in life, and, like, I'm kind of out to some people and not others, because, like Nick was saying, there's, like, extra social isolation culturally, like, with black women. Not to mention also in the military, that's the whole thing. Yes, it's horrible, very bad. I just outed myself. But, like, you know, there's that thing too. People are, like, talking all this shit about, oh my God, well, I think bi people are just, like, nasty because you just like to fuck everybody. It was like, so, well, let's back it up. You're straight, right? You're only attracted to men. And this person was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so, you know, do you want to fuck every man you see? Right? Like, you have a type. Like, you have some people you're attracted to and some you aren't. So just because both sexes are an option, or all genders are an option, doesn't mean that you're just, like, legs wide open for everybody. Like, it's not, that's not how it works. You know?
And even if you were, honestly, who cares? Like, it's not a big deal.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, just catering to the male gaze always, you know, it's just like, what can I do to be more attractive to men? What can I do to be more desired by men? And again, growing up as a minority, I lived partially in the South and I grew up in the North for a little bit. And it was the same way that these people, right, who looked all a certain way, they looked very similar, right? They were the people who were regarded as beautiful. And with purity culture also being a part of that, it was like, okay, well, I'm better than them because, like, I'm pure and, like, I'm not having sex. But really, that was just a cop-out because, like, no one was trying to, like, fuck me anyways. So it's like, oh, like, I can, like, I wasn't seen as attractive by these people, but I can use that as, like, a leg up in my own brain to be like, oh, like, well, this is why, like, I'm just better than men. And that's just internalized misogynist, like, bullshit, essentially, which we all know that now. But looking back, I'm like, oh, or when the Facebook shows you those memories from, like, 10 years ago, I'm like, oh my God, shame. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, should I just delete my entire account? Like, I'm not the same anymore. Like, I've changed. Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in and say that, yes, I think the competition thing is such a heavy block from us knowing that we're queer, because I know even after I was like, okay, I'm definitely queer, there was a really long time, I think like a year, where I could picture having sex with women, but I couldn't picture dating a woman. And I couldn't picture like being in love with a woman or having a woman fulfill me in the way that I would think of like my relationships with men being fulfilling. And thank God that finally changed, but it took like a whole year of me being like, this has got to be some heavy internalized bullshit and I have to work through this. And like now I can look at a woman or someone of any gender and be like, wow, this person like would be a really good partner, and I could picture going on dates and having fun and, being romantic and like doing nice things for them. But it took such a long time. And I think that was always kind of in my head, this idea that like women are less valuable and being chosen by a woman would be like less valuable than being chosen by a man, even though as Mohera has pointed out, a lot of the dudes that I was chasing and trying to get chose by were fucking like trash. They just weren't, if I'll be kind, they weren't emotionally available, and they had a lot of their own shit going on that they weren't working on. And, and then you have like all these girlfriends, you have all these people out in the world where you're like, wow, these people are amazing and I respect them so much. And yet somehow in my head, I'm still not valuing them the way that I'm valuing these other people. And that shit like is fucking real, I think everyone that I've talked to who's come out as like bisexual has had a very similar experience, being like, okay, I know now that like sexually I'm attracted, but I can't imagine a long-term relationship. And I'm like, that's fucking rough.
It took me literally like having a dream about like going down on a woman, and I was like, right? So I was like,
yeah, same.
And like, of course, my like Christian upbringing, I'm like, what is the Lord trying to tell me? Like, what does this mean? Like, I need an interpreter, And even after, like, that's when I was in a relationship with like a cis man, and it was years later again that I could finally come to terms with it. It's just like a mental block, like literally not even an option, at all. And then when, it just like cracks wide open, it's like, oh shit, like the possibilities are endless. And like you were saying, how it was less valuable or less important or, to be desired by a woman. But now when a man compliments me, I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. And then when a woman tells me like I look cute, I'm like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you so much. Like, I'm just like bawning. And, when guys say anything to me, I'm like, yeah, don't breathe in my ear. Like, complete opposite now. But I feel the same way. It's totally flipped now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest things was, like, I had gotten to a point in my relationship with my mom where I had finally understood, like, all the toxic things that she had, like, instilled in me growing up. And so I was like, okay, there's a lot of really bad shit I've internalized, so let me work through that. And so that at that point, I was in college, and obviously, like, I wasn't around the same people I was with, like, high school and stuff like that. And so I'm working through all this stuff, and then I'm actually making, like, female friends. So, you know, I was in engineering, and, like, I'm making, like, just meeting other women in STEM who were, like, very similar to me. And I actually felt like we, like, really got along and really connected. So, like, having, like, really good, genuine female friendships was, like, the first thing that was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, now I see it. And then I remember, like, I had an internship with the Humane League, and I went to a retreat in, like, up north, and I remember just, like, meeting all of these, like, amazing women from, like, all over the country, and, you know, from, like, California, and just, like, also a lot more, like, progressive areas too, which I think, like, I wasn't really used to, like, being around women who were really just, like, radical and progressive like me. And I was like, wow, like, okay, you know, and it's like they're hot and they're nice and they're super, like, smart and, like, educated and, like, really outgoing. I was like, okay, like, I all right. I was like, this kind of feels nice, you know, like, I like this. And then, of course, like, then once TikTok happened, that was like the gates just blew open. I was like, yeah. I'm gay. I'm so fucking gay. I want women. I want oh my God, like, how have I been straight my whole life? What? I'm like, and I, like, distinctly remember just, like, seeing this, like, really hot soft mask lesbian on TikTok, and she was doing, like, a bachata kind of dance. And I remember thinking, like, I want her to do me so bad. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then that was the moment I was like, sis, I don't think you're totally straight. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I think I don't think I'm straight anymore. Yep, nope.
Like, I can see it now. All right, I get it.
I think the pandemic did that for a lot of people, right? Because, like, that's when TikTok got huge, and, like, you see all these people coming out now, whether it's, like, celebrities or, you know, your average Joe or Jane or Jill or whatever. And so, for me, I kind of knew, I was in a, like, 5-year relationship with a cis man, and I was unhappy for a really long time, happy, and for many reasons, but, I was like, listen, we need a break, like, it was just too much, so I was like, we need no contact, and so that was, like, in February, so right when the pandemic was, like, ramping up. So in January, right in February, I'd also gone to this gay bar in town, and oh my God, like, can you say, like, slut vibes? I was like, oh, you're gonna buy me a drink? Yeah, cool. Like, hang out with this person, that person, like, again, the fucking Snapchat memories was like, oh, on this day, I'm like, damn, like, I don't remember who that was, but, like, she was hot, you know, like, it was amazing. And I was hanging out with my, like, best friend a lot because we worked together, and so it was kind of our quarantine pod. And so we were hanging out, we were working together, and that's a plot twist, spoiler alert, who I'm married to now. So
yay!
That's the whole thing. Yeah, and it was fun talking about it. Yeah, like, we were drinking margaritas, and we were sitting on their couch, and I just, like, got up, and I went to their backyard, and I threw up, and I got back in, and they kissed me. I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, this will just be like a, you know, every once in a while type situation. Like, no, we're married now. But, you know, just not being forced to participate in that heteronormativity, like, and when you're able to take a step back from it, it's like, oh shit, like, you can kind of see things for what they are, because when you're so immersed in something and it's so normal to you, it really is, that mental block is still there. It's just hard to imagine anything else. And so the second you take a step back, you're like, oh, like, possibilities, you know? And my partner is also non-binary, so that's a whole other thing. Like you were saying, it's like cis normativity too, or like, you know, like when we went to get our marriage license, the options were bride, groom, and partner. So it's just
okay,
like,
good.
Bride and partner, like, you're not my wife, but not my, you know, husband either. And, like, there's no non-binary word for spouse. So, like, there's all these things, and it's fucking weird. Like, and we we were like making a bank account because like we just bought a house, and so they were like, oh, okay, what's the gender? I was like, well, do you want sex or gender? Because you're talking about genitalia, sex, but gender, it's not just two options. And it was really cool. The woman on the phone was like, wow, like, thank you so much for educating me on this. I'm actually going to, and like at the end of the phone call, she was like, I'm going to make a suggestion to like our department who like takes these things. And she's like, what options would you like to see? I was like, well, really it should be omitted altogether because who cares, right? If people are going to be on the account, it's whatever. But, if you're going to have options, it should be gender. If you want genitalia, it's sex, which shouldn't matter if you're not providing medical care to someone. So it's just the whole thing. And like, she was really cool. And like, thank you. She's like, I'm in the older generation. I just love learning. And I feel like a lot of people my age are like really resistant to change. And like, they're just scared. I was like, oh my God, I love you. Like, you're one of the good ones. Like, and hashtag not all boomers, but.
Yeah, thanks, boomer. But like, genuinely, thank you.
Exactly. So that was pretty cool, but there's all these things, and it's just so like assumed. Like, this woman at Whole Foods was like, it came up that I was getting married because I try to like know the people that places I shop at, like the co-op or the farmer's market and stuff. I try to like build some sort of rapport with them, and it came up that I was getting married, and she was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, like I'm so happy for you. And she was like, yes honey, like just keep God first, like everything's gonna be fine. And she was like, as long as he's a God-fearing man. And I was like, oh, baby, you have no idea. And it's just like, do I tell her? Because like I don't owe anyone that information. So like I don't want to feel disingenuous and lie, and like I'm not ashamed of my partner. So it's just like this huge conundrum of like, what the fuck do I do? Like, is it worth it? Like, I don't know, but very bizarre.
That is a weird thing to deal with, because I deal with that with my gender a lot, where I'm like, do I bother to make this an educational moment, or do I just like go about my day, and is it safe? Like sometimes you're not sure how safe it is, and it's a lot. So I can imagine. I can only imagine. Yeah, exactly. I probably should have prepped this question, so let me know if you want to talk about it or not, but I feel like genital repulsion, repulsion comes up a lot, and like, can we talk about it?
Yes. I think for me...
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I feel like, I was very... So like with the whole purity culture thing and like saving yourself for a man, like virginity was like the most important thing, like for me growing up, like to stay a virgin until marriage, that was just like peak importance in my life. And that was ingrained into me in a very young age. Also, I was told, like, this is so bad. Like, my mom literally told me, like, growing up, she's like, sex is horrible. It sucks. It's terrible. You lay there. It lasts like 5 minutes and then it's over. And like, I remember being like,
she just told on your dad.
I was like, good.
You're like, Pops, we need to have a conversation.
I was like, what? And like, this was like her like having the talk with me. And like, I remember thinking, why does anybody do it then? Like, I was like, that sounds horrible. Like, why? And then like, I remember being like really scared of sex, just like in general. And then my mom being like very like sex shamey and stuff, like, oh, only like gross, like disgusting people like go down on somebody, and like just all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, oh, okay, so there's like the appropriate things to do with sex, and then there's like the inappropriate things to do with sex. And then also I just was really uncomfortable with the idea of sex in general. And then once I did finally like have sex with my partner, I was like, wow, this was nothing like what Mama said. Like, I was like, shit, that was fun. Like, when can I do that again? Damn. And so I think that to me was also like a huge thing of like becoming comfortable with myself as a sexual being and like understanding that part of myself. And then when I decided for myself, like, hey, these are the things like I'm comfortable doing, these are the things I'm like not comfortable doing and all that, and just being more comfortable with like my own body and like my partner's body and stuff like that. I think that was a huge part of me overcoming the whole like genital repulsion thing. And then like when I actually had like a dream of like going down on a woman, I was like, okay, yep, I'm bi. I'm bi. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really know what to classify myself as. It's like, oh, lesbian, like I'm gay as fuck, and then like I'm a non-binary partner, so it's like, you know, what the fuck, labels, right?
Right.
But yeah, I remember being with like my male partners, and like if it was like a one-off like hookup type thing, it was fun. There was excitement around it, but like in my long-term relationships, I was just like, oh, like here we go. Like it was really a chore, and it sounds like, and you know, and that goes back to like the bad sex versus like, you know, assault type of thing. It's like, am I really enjoying this? Like my body language cannot be telling you that I'm enjoying this, yet you're continuing. So it's just like, what's going on here? Like,
right.
And you know, for me personally, like when I think of like penises, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I'm not like, yeah, let me hop on that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just so odd, and it took even like before then, when I was kind of like more into it and, you know, less in tune with myself, I really couldn't enjoy sex because it was like, oh, I'm not married, like this is a sin, like I, you know, there was all this baggage that came with it, and so I would like completely dissociate and be like, okay, cool, that's over, awesome, 30 seconds, amazing, like, and when I came out to my parents, and same, Mohera, like my mom is like, well, you know, you can be happy with a man if you really tried. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Really try? Like I have to try it for so many things in my life. And being happy with my literal lifelong partner is not one of them. Like, do you wake up every day like, all right, try to be happy? Like, if so, like, Dad, I'd be asking some questions right now. Like, is that the life you're trying to live? The life that you want for your child? Because like that ain't it. Like, I'm not trying to wake up and be like, all right, I gotta really try to be happy today. Like, fuck that. Like, no, that should be one of the easy parts. Like, I'm not saying relationships are, you know, rainbows and butterflies. What the fuck? Like, you know, being happy is like the bare minimum. It just
you would think.
So yeah, one would think.
One would think. Did you struggle with like concerns about vaginas and all of that? Did you like when you were in this process? When did you have that dream?
So there was the dream, and then when I finally like was in the situation, it was so intuitive. Like I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel like, of course I was excited, but it was just very like natural. You know, it's just like, okay, I have one. Like I kind of what feels good, and like I joke with my partner, and they're always like, you're psychic. Like it's fucking creepy, but like I'm in tune with myself and like other people, and I can pick up on like what they're liking or not enjoying, and they were like, this is your first time, like you're definitely slight brag, but anyways,
you're like, no big deal, but I'm just kind of a sex goddess, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
well, that's kind of like what I was thinking about that somewhat recently as well, because I was like, yeah, why am I so nervous about this? Like, I've always been very intuitive, and like, why would this be different? You know, and just trying to break down those barriers of thinking like, sure, genitalia is different and people are different, but like, that's kind of the point, is like, I've always treated each partner as their own unique experience. So it's like, it's just more of that. It's really not that much. It's really not complicated, you know, but we think like, oh my God, this is like a whole different thing. And I think it can be in some ways, right? But like, especially when it's the right thing and you've not felt that way before. But, you know, at the same time, it's just bodies and people and communication. Yeah.
That also goes like back to, I think, us being conditioned that like vaginas are dirty, right?
Yes.
And you know, we have to clean them, and like all these fucking products. Like if you go to the store, all the shit.
The vagina aisle.
Smell good, and like it's supposed to tastes like this, or like you see shit online, like eat pineapples and mix it with this. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, your mouth is gonna be raw from eating pineapples. You're gonna have a yeast infection. Like, stop shoving
Yes.
it up there. Like,
I'm very prone to UTIs. It's like,
Yes.
don't
Yes.
put sugar anywhere near that, please.
Oh my god, yes. Literally just water, drink water, and leave it alone. Like, they will say thank you. Like,
Yeah.
I remember growing up, like, oh my gosh, and like constantly like washing, and I would carry all these wipes and shit around, and like, what's it like? What? Like, who told me this? Like, that's purity culture. Like, you're dirty, you're bad, you're sinful nature. Like, it goes all the way to the top. Like, that's all
Yes.
I've never heard it put that way before, and that is so perfect. It does go all the way to the top. It's like, hey, knock it off.
Yeah.
I think us being kin to shit, I feel like I really internalized that a lot. And you know, even like listening to like rap music or whatever, and they're always like, oh, if it smells like water, then I might go down on it, kind of thing. And it's just like this, and like female rappers too, always talking about how like their pussy's so clean, and you know, it's just sucks. It sucks to feel ashamed of yourself and then realize like
Men don't feel like
how
No.
Are you kidding me?
They'll just
Their
whip
dicks
out
are
their
fucking
dick.
everywhere.
They'll just whip them out, and I'm like, I did not want to see that. Whoa.
I love how hot we both just got. Are you kidding me? Oh my god.
I feel like too, there's like a lot of, it's like the signs, like, you know how like now, like when you come out as queer and then like you kind of think back and you're like, damn, I should have known all along. Like, why didn't I? And it's like one of the biggest things for me, which I think because of like CompHet and like my just like internalized hatred for women, I really didn't have a lot of like things early on in my life that would have helped me indicate that I was like not straight. But I think the biggest thing for me was whenever they would show like a heterosexual like sex scene in a movie and it was like actually showing like all the junk and stuff, like every time I would see a woman, I was like turned on. I was just like, wow. Like boobs, oh my god. I love
are
boobs.
great.
Boobs
are amazing.
Boobs. And I'm just like, wow, why did I never
Boobs were my breakthrough genital. I was like, I could get down with some boobs. And that was like the gateway drug. And then I was like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah. It's like when they say like like first kids try marijuana.
Yeah.
It's like first it's boobs and then
First
it's
it's
everything
boobs.
else.
And into pussy.
I would like always, I was like, oh my god. And then every time I would see a man naked, I would be like, please stop. Like, like, oh, okay. And then it's like, but so like my partner is like a cishet white dude, but like I know that for me, like with him, I don't feel uncomfortable like about his body, and so that also helped me understand like how my like attraction towards people is influenced by like my feelings as well as like the natural just like physical or like sexual attraction, and it's just kind of like a combination of the two. But yeah, I just was like, and in my mind I rationalized it like, oh well, like this is how I'm supposed to feel. I'm supposed to be just like turned on by this sex scene, right? Even though like I'm finding this guy like really, really gross when he takes off his pants, but you know what? It's okay. It's okay. I'm like, I should have known.
Well, I thought that was normal. Like, you know, kind of having like dating men but hating them, kind of like. Women, you know, on social, and they're like, oh, sex with my husband, whatever, and like it's kind of this joke, but I'm also like, are you good, sis? Like, blink twice for help. Like, you know, like that should be normalized to like having to lay there and just take it, or like feel like it's a chore, or just not enjoy yourself. And a lot of cishet men like see toys and all these things as like competition almost, and like, oh my gosh, but like, really, they're your friends. Like, listen, they're your friends, trust me. And
Right.
So yeah, it's weird. Like, I thought that was normal, just like not really enjoy it that much, but just to do it because, you know, that's your partner. And that goes back to like Christianity is denying yourself and the self-sacrifice all the fucking time for everything. So why would sex be a part of it, you know?
I had a really interesting comment from one of our asexual community members who was saying that purity culture, I think it was on the stream with Lua where we were talking about her religious upbringing, but they were saying that, you know, being asexual, growing up with purity culture can be helpful, right? Because like you're seeing that you're doing the right thing, but they were saying that after, once you're married, it switches and like then you're expected to have sex as like your wifely duty or whatever. And so it's like this weird, like even asexual people are harmed by this like idea of purity culture and sex as like obligation, like marital obligation.
Yeah,
I thought that was
There's
interesting.
no room for asexuality or anything
Anywhere.
quote unquote divergent, right? In purity culture, and certainly not in our society. You know, for a while I was like, well, am I asexual? Like, I'm really not vibing. And this is before like I got in touch with my queerness and figured out like, oh, like, that's it, you know? But it's not being ace. It's just, yeah, it's just not being into men that much. But yeah, the whole like duty thing, like, why is that a chore? Like, other things are chores, but like, it should be enjoyable. Like, and
Right.
I remember telling my parents, and it was a whole thing. Like, it was really fucking bad and super traumatic. But like, my mom was like, you know, like reproducing, it's like male and female. I was like, Mom, like I'm put on this earth to do more than reproduce and like carry children. Like I have so much more to offer this world. Like, is that what all you think I'm worth? And she's like, well, if you want to take it there. I was like, no, like, you literally like, you brought it up. But you know, that's the thing. And like, what if I couldn't have children, quote unquote, naturally, right? Like, then what? Am I worth less to you? Or like, would adopted grandchildren be loved less by you? Like, what if I couldn't, and then I still wouldn't feel comfortable telling you because you put all this emphasis on like grandbabies, and like before she knew, I would be like, I would stay telling her like, you got grandkids money, like, you know, and you're going like, I want McDonald's, like, you got McDonald's money, like, you got grandkids money because those shits are expensive, girl. Like,
I love that.
I can't. So there's just there's so much, and like reproduction, and I know so many people who like come out of evangelicalism and like they love their children, but like really they had them because they felt like that was part of their duty, like as a woman, and if they could go back they probably wouldn't. It doesn't mean they love their kids any less, but like when you do something because you're obligated, like it's not that great, you know, like it's not as fun as it would be if it was your actual choice, and that's just lack of consent. You just go with the norm, it's fine, you know, you just do what you're supposed to do. So
yeah, and it ties so much into rape culture too, because it normalizes that like women not really consenting or enjoying the sex that they're having, and that being very normalized for men. And it's funny too, because I feel like a lot of men will cite that as like a reason to have an affair. Of like, oh, well, I feel like you don't want to fuck me. And it's like, well, I don't want to fuck you.
First of all.
So like, why don't we just break up? And like, why don't you also be a better person? But yeah, I look back on some relationships that I had and just it like chills me, and I'm having to process sexual trauma from that kind of dynamic where it was like, well, you know, I need sex every day, so you just need to give it to me. And that's like part of your job here in this relationship is to like sexually please me. And it's like, why? You know, like why is that the dynamic? And why, oh my God, I was even just talking about this with Maureen because we were bitching about, and Mohera a bit, we were bitching about the COVID vaccine, which I can go off about in the after party if anyone's interested. But long story short is that so many of the really serious side effects of the COVID vaccine are all happening to people with like female reproductive organs. And like the Johnson & Johnson thing with the blood clots, they're now determining that that's probably because the people were on birth control, and apparently that's not something they tested for. So also, if your titties hurt, it's not your imagination. Apparently the COVID vaccine mimics breast cancer symptoms. So I've been over here thinking I had breast cancer for like 2 or 3 days till one of my friends was like, oh, I heard that's a symptom of the vaccine. And I was like, thank God, like, Jesus, I've been freaking out. So the reason I bring this up is because Maureen was saying, you know, of course, and she was saying like, so we're suffering harsher consequences, but we're also the ones that are more likely to go get the vaccine. And we're not accommodated in these studies and trials. And it's just part of this culture that we are here to just like take pain and discomfort into our bodies for the sake of other people. Like we're so used to sacrificing ourselves, right, for the greater good or for someone else's happiness. And I feel like this all ties in together with like what we were just talking about.
Fucking yes. I'm sorry. Like the fact that people with period pain is normal. Like no, it's common, but it's not normal. You should not be doubled over in the fetal position every time you get your period. Like there are other things at play. The first time I had a panic attack, I literally thought I was having a heart attack because I literally I was never been an anxious person. So I'm like driving. It's a very calm day. Like there were no triggers. I was having a great time. Then my heart just starts fucking racing. Check my Apple Watch. My heart rate is like 150 something. I'm like, okay, not normal. My dogs are in the car with me, so I'm like, well, I can't really pull over. And I'm going through this town. I'm like, probably not. Let me just keep on rolling through. Like, not trying to be hanging out here tonight. Wink, wink. Literally hanging. So I'm just gonna keep on rolling. We'll wait till I get to bigger town. But like, I finally went to the hospital, and they were like, they were doing my vitals and this and that. And I was like, oh, like, by the way, like, I'm not on hormonal birth control, so it's probably not a PE, like a pulmonary embolism, but, like, they didn't even ask me that. Meanwhile, I know there's, like, a black box warning for a lot of these medications and stuff, and it's not that it's not useful for some people, right? Like, it's about informed consent. Tell me what the risks are, and if that still works for me at that time in my life, then, yeah, like, let me do it, knowing everything. But feeling like you have to hide things, like, don't be fucking shady about it. Like, it's my body, and don't just like try to hide shit. I don't appreciate that. And like people just like, why would they control for that in the clinical trials for COVID, right? Like, you control for things that could be like a possible interference, but no, it's women. Like they don't even think about it. Just like we weren't part of so many trials that contributed to medicine and literature that is applied to us, right? But so how does the science apply to us? We weren't part of like creating the science. Like the math ain't mapping. Like fucking
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I just
no, I'm like trying to hold myself back because I could go off about this for like the rest of the time. I won't do it, but I will just say that yes, and this happens in so many different ways. Like when I looked up the different vaccines, one of the things I was looking for was like weight, because you know, I'm heavier than I used to be. And I was like, I know that there's thresholds that they don't test over because they like fat people don't exist or deserve life, I guess. And that was one of the reasons I went with the Pfizer one, because it worked. It had better efficacy with people over a certain weight than like the Moderna one did. And it's like, these are all the things that we have to think about, but like the fucking scientists aren't thinking about, right? Like we have to worry about this shit. And yeah, I just, especially the birth control thing, it just blows my mind because it's like all of us are pushed onto birth control if we have any kind of issues at all with our cycle. And then, yeah, it's a thing that's never considered for these clinical trials.
Yes,
infuriating.
Totally. I think too, like, I think like as a society, women are basically like seen as almost like second-class citizens, kind of. And I think that's just like in general, like we just kind of get like pushed down like the totem pole, sort of. And I think I think that plays a role in like understanding like your sexuality, but also like being like growing up and being in the South, and then also like going to church and stuff like that. Like you just like hear that a lot, you know. It's very like, wives, be submissive to your husbands, and I was like, fuck that. Like, I was like, do I look like a submissive bitch? Like, okay. No. And I just like remember always like hearing that stuff and just feeling like really uncomfortable, because like I wasn't raised Christian, but like around middle school and that, I basically was just like really depressed and stuff. And you know, my mom had a friend who started bringing her to church, and so then I like also started going to church, and then it was like a good feeling, like, oh good, like, you know, when I die I'll have somewhere nice to go and all that, and that like made me feel better. And so I would just like kind of buy into it. But I always felt that like cognitive dissonance of like, was like, no, like women are people too, and like we have rights too, and like we should be happy, and like our, you know, like our lives have meaning, like beyond just having kids. And it was just like so normal to see like, oh, you know, this woman gets married, and then like, you know, her husband, and then very soon they have kids, and just like the same like cycle. And I just was like, man, I just don't really want that. Like I want something more. And then hearing about like all the anti like gay marriage stuff, and I was like, I don't know, it was like, my best friend's a lesbian, and she has like the literal best relationship I have ever seen in like my entire life. And it was just like, it was fuck with me so much. And, you know, and even just then the idea of like potentially losing my salvation or something like that, that was like terrifying. And I didn't want that. And then finally, you know, when I got to a point where I was like, fuck Christianity, like fuck all this, like it's all bullshit, it's all nonsense, then like you can start like opening up your mind to like actual just like real logical arguments, like understanding social constructs and how heteronormativity is a social fucking construct, and actually most of the animal kingdom is gay as fuck. And I'm like, what? Like giraffes, male giraffes are gay. Who would have known that?
They're so gay.
They're so fucking gay. Literally, they basically,
right?
like, I'm telling you, literally, like, male giraffes will only have sex with, like, female giraffes to reproduce, and otherwise they're just like, bye, bitch, I'm having sex with this other, like, male giraffe. Like, they're so fucking gay. And I'm like, what? Why was I never taught this in school? Why didn't I know this? Because, like, we were preached heteronormativity, and that, like, oh, that's how everything is. Everything is heterosexual in life, right? And it's like, that is so far from the truth. And it's like, then when you realize that, you're like, oh my God, Everett!
Everett, it's been a spicy one. Like, you don't even know.
We started off on 1,000, Everett.
Honestly, we did. And it's just like been going on.
But no, and I love that you brought that up, because not only is the naturalness of homosexuality, like, or pansexuality, you know, whatever, queerness, erased from nature, but also recreational sex is erased from nature. Like, recreational sex is so normal in nature. When you look around, animals are constantly fucking for fun. But then when we're taught, you know, the Christian values are built around sex is just for reproduction. And I think they try to make that seem like natural law, but it's not. Animals fuck all the time just for the hell of it. They masturbate, for fuck's sake. Like, they're out here having a great time, and we're all like, oh, see, like, animals only have sex for reproduction. It's like, no, they don't. No, they don't. They're gay as fuck, and they're horny, and they're out here doing crazy things, you know? They know what's up.
Well, also, people try to act like trans people have not existed for fucking ever. Like,
thank you.
Like, and I was telling my mom that, I was like, listen, like, trans and non-binary people have been around forever. Like, it's not something new. Like, just because you haven't heard of it yet, like, doesn't mean it's a new thing. And she's like, well, the devil is real, and he's been around forever. So I was like, okay, girl, like, I'm not, I won't even stop there. But, like, I've been learning about animals who, like, literally change their sex and, like, genitals to, like, for not, like, to survive and like reproduce and continue their species. Like, there are like aquatic marine life and other animals who do that. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, of course you're not going to teach you that in, you know, elementary or whatever school, because it doesn't fit the narrative of the fucking mainstream bullshit. Like, I wish I knew this. Like, when you learn things later, it's cool, but then you're angry. Like, why did no one teach me this? You know?
Yes. Welcome to the last like 10 years of my life. Just spent in a blaze of anger. Yeah. I mean, really my whole life, but yeah, and I think what was I going to say? Oh, and yes, and also I think that part of this narrative too of like, why are these things existing now and not before? Like, people think about trans people, queer people, whatever. It's like, also though, like, these categories didn't always exist. So that's a part of it too, is like back in the day, a trans person or a queer person didn't need to identify themselves in that way because there weren't categories to be fighting against. And obviously I'm talking like way back in the day, but like, yeah, there's so much, there's I shouldn't say so much, but there's evidence that like for us, these constructs are pretty new as a species, and that we were also like animals in the sense that we just kind of flowed and didn't really feel the need to label these things. And so I just think it's really wild. Like, it's definitely like oppressor logic to be like, oh, I created this category and now I'm like, well, who are all these people who don't fit into this category? And it's like, well, you just created it though. Like, you put that on everyone else. So yeah, there's going to be people who don't fit into it. It's not a real thing.
I think like what a lot of people don't understand is how much like Eurocentricity plays into like all of this stuff. Because it's like in India, they're like, it's very common to have like, so there's like a group of people like hijras, and they literally are like a third gender. Like they are like what in America, like the West, we would consider like trans, like non-binary and all that stuff. And they just like exist, and they're like a whole group of fucking people. And like I remember being in women and gender studies and learning about like in indigenous cultures, they have people who like will adopt like throughout different times of their life will adopt like more of like a feminine kind of like gender or like a masculine kind of gender, just depending on like different seasons and stuff. And it's just like, oh my God, like literally all of this stuff is just like rooted in like Western like colonization and stuff like that. And even too, like it's so hard for me, especially like you know, like being Indian and stuff, and I'll see like even just like conversations like going back to like purity. So like, you know, in India, like a lot of women wear saris, and so like you always wear like a blouse like underneath like your sari. And I was seeing this girl like talking, and she was reading up that basically like women never wore like blouses under their saris until the British came to India and conquered, and they were like, "Ew, these disgusting heathens walking around without a top on." And, and then they were like, "Cover up, you like shameless people," and also Christianity.
And also
And then I was like, what? Like, are you kidding me? So all of these like purity standards, what's considered modesty, our sexuality, our gender identities, all this is just fucking like Western colonization. And I'm like, what?
yeah, it's really bad. Was that the understatement of the year? Nick says colonization, it's really bad. Don't do it. Yeah, no, that's why I love reading about, you know, just other cultures and also how things have been historically, because I think it does highlight so starkly what really is a construct of like a tool of the like oppressor and why, you know, because I think too, like, I think we assume that these things have a certain logic and make sense in like a good way, like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense for us to have these structures. But I think once you actually understand the mechanisms of why these were created, then you're like, oh, I get it now. Like, this was literally meant to oppress people and to keep people from themselves.
Yeah,
it's not good.
It's not good.
It's not
Put
good.
it on a t-shirt. Stop and do it.
No bueno, no bueno.
Capitalism, all that, like, they thrive when you're not in tune with yourself. And I think women and femmes especially, you know, are disembodied, if you will, to perpetuate and to uphold and participate in these structures and these systems. And, you know, I think that's why in Christianity, for example, you know, lean not unto your own understanding, because my own understanding is my tuition, you know, my intuition, and that can be right, or that can lead me in the way that's going to be best for me, not for the system. And so I just think these systems that oppress us rely on us not being in tune with ourselves. And so when I finally was able to like see through the bullshit and listen to myself, it was scary because I was like, okay. And like, you know, evangelicals would have you believe that like once you stray from the Lord, you know, and do all these things, like your life is just gonna suck and be awful. But like there's so much like abundance in truth and like living your truth and being yourself. Like this is totally off topic, but you know,
love it.
We adopted, right?
On brand for the show. Yeah.
Dog who like we found like chained up, like heartworms, fucking ribs sticking out. It was so bad. I was like, we can't leave her like this. Like, we have to take her in. And so this was like after I'd come out like on Instagram and stuff and like showed my photos and like been like, yeah, gay as fuck, what's good. So like people who I wouldn't even imagined like were donating to her like heartworm treatment and stuff. Like we have not had to pay a penny out of pocket so far. Like when we went to get married, and we were gone for like 10 days, and I was gonna put my dogs in this like lodge, and it's like the fucking bougiest shit in our city, to make sure they were taken care of, and like I can spy on them and stuff. And like someone anonymously paid for like almost $1,000 literally for them to and just like people have been so supportive and so loving. And it's just like, you know, the oppressor would have you believe that when you live your truth and listen to yourself and like you know, like I said, live out your truth, like that all these bad things are going to happen. Like you need to listen to the Lord only, like follow the narrative. But really, like that's not the case. Like I've seen it firsthand, and it's just like it makes my head spin. I'm like, whoa, like that's actually a thing. Like I'm gonna be fine. It's okay. Like I'm not gonna burn in hell. Like it's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Every time like a Christian person though is like, gay people are gonna go to hell, and I'm sorry. Okay, just quick clarification. So all the gay people are gonna go to hell together. So
sounds like a good time.
I was like, so we're all gonna be there together. They're like, yeah, and I'm like,
cool.
Say less.
It's like I'm packing my sunscreen, working on my base tan. I'm ready. Well, that is funny also in the reverse, because I'm like, wait, so it's a bunch of people like you are in heaven? Like, no, thank you. I don't want to hang out with all of you. That sounds horrible. King Cyrus was saying, there are murals of the time of Ashoka women being bare-breasted with many of their clothing. It's true of Mesopotamia. And I would love, if anyone needs an idea for like a dissertation or something, I would love a research paper sent to me about the role of like breasts, the sexualization of breasts, and like colonization, because there's got to be a whole fucking thing there.
Okay, I was like watching, I think it was like a part of like a documentary or something, and basically like it was something like these people were talking about like breasts, like, you know, how boobs get sexualized and like Western culture and all that stuff, and they went to these like tribes, like I think in the East or something like that, and they basically were asking like, because like women will like, you know, walk around like without tops on, or like showing, you know, like their boobs and stuff, and the people were asking like these tribes like, hey, you know, like what about boobs? And they're like, what about it? And they're like, and they just were like, I don't understand what you're asking. And then the people had to explain, they're like, oh, well, like in the West, like boobs are like very sexual. And literally the people are like, silly Westerners, like, what is this?
I love it.
And then I just was like, yeah, so it's like just so strange to me that And like also it's here, like being like in America, like we're told like, oh, like boobs are just naturally the sexual thing, and everybody just sees them and like is just like, oh my god. And it's like that is literally factually incorrect. And it goes back to again like Eurocentricity and our social constructs, again, like created to shame women and keep them oppressed with respect to their own bodies.
Yes.
Which is why, like, fucking poor children, babies are, like, eating under blankets and shit, or in, like, a nasty-ass public bathroom. And, like, I have friends, like, who nurse their kids and stuff, and, like, I'm always advocating for, like, someone says, I'm like, do you eat your blanket, like, do you eat your food under a blanket? Like, are you gonna have your lunch under a fucking quilt today? Like,
yeah, you're really grossing me out with your chewing. Can you please put a blanket over your head?
Right? And, like,
I would love that.
And like the sexualization of Black women. Like, I remember being a freshman in high school, and I had on a tank top, just like all the Jessicas and Laurens and Shelbys were wearing. And, you know, I remember getting called to the office, and I was like, okay, weird, because it's a fucking goody two shoes. So I'm like, I haven't done anything. And they were like, oh, your cleavage is showing, like it's too much. And I'm like, I don't even have boobs hardly. Like, what are you talking about? And it was a whole thing. And it was a Black woman, assistant principal, who pulled me to the side to say this. And it's just like, it goes so fucking deep. It's internalized so far. And it's just disgusting. Like, I hate that because she's probably not comfortable with herself either. Like, it's,
and probably like trying to, you know, follow the rules to be safe and like succeed in that system, and it's like, but at what cost, you know?
Exactly.
Like,
when both of our bosses were like fucking white men, so of course. It's
so complicated. I used to I would get called on my clothes more often than my coworker, who is very thin, and I'm like more curvy. And same thing, we could be wearing like the same length skirt, and I would get like called in, and she wouldn't. I mean, it's different, but like it's also just the way that certain bodies are policed more than other bodies. Like my body was seen as more sexual because my coworker was like very thin and not very curvy. You know, she was pretty like straight, and I'm like very curvy. And I would always get shit for my clothes, and I'm like, she's literally wearing like the same thing, but I like, it would just look like
at work
inappropriate on me, you know. And just having boobs in the world sucks. It just sucks.
Yes. I feel like also too, like a lot of these like dress code, like modesty kind of things are very neglecting of like other cultures, because for me, like in Indian culture, it's very common to have like your midriff showing like in clothes. Like that's such a common thing, and like literally nobody would bat an eyelash. And then I just kind of then started noticing that like if something like, if you know, me as like an Indian woman, if I wore something like that in like a setting of like American people, it would be seen like what I was wearing would be seen as like inappropriate because it was like literally just showing my midriff. And I was like, dude, I don't know how to explain this to you, but like this is totally normal where I come from. like literally nobody would find anything wrong with this at all. And like, I was like constantly like dress coded for like wearing stuff that was like totally like appropriate and fine. And then like the preppy white girls would never get that. Like that would never happen to them. And again, like I think all that just goes back to like also as like a woman of color getting really frustrated with like white women, and like white women were the only kinds of women that I was really around, and it just was like, they suck. Why does everybody like them?
Yeah, 100%.
The cultural thing goes even further than like, you know, modesty, even hair, you know, like especially being in the fucking military. Like I was young and dumb and I'm still reaping the consequences, but like, you know, fucking like my hair, or like the way it grows naturally, like it's curly, it's huge, you know, and it's big, and like that's unprofessional. But like someone can roll up to work or school with like wet hair still, like straight out of the shower, which like I think that's fine, but I think it'll be fine for me too. But I literally just less than a year ago wore my hair like out like natural as a fucking 25-year-old. Like that's ridiculous, right? Like
Wow.
why am I just now comfortable? Like it was even more recently that I wore braids for the first time, and like I've gotten these faux locks for the first time because I've always been in, you know, like my hair had heat damage for so long because I was just trying to straighten it so much. I got relaxers, like chemical shit, you know, and it's just like, this is damage to myself and my body for the greater good that is still not even recognized. Not the greater good, but sorry, the society at large, right? This system that's not even recognizing me as equal or worthy still. So I can do all these things, but it doesn't matter because I still am who I am, right? Like you can try so hard to fit into this box, but like you can make it through. Like, not quite, because you're this or you're that. So like, what gives? And so I was like, fuck it. Like I'm gonna do what I want, you know, with my hair, with my body, like. And my partner has helped a lot because like they're like, oh, I love your hair like that, or like, wow, like you look so beautiful like tan, you know, like, and just hilarious. We're on the beach and like their family is like, gotta reapply, you know, like,
and you're like,
yes, same girl, same. I was like, melanin babes for the win, yeah.
yes.
I was like, no, trust me, this is different. Like you're gonna. I was like, no, trust me, girl. Like, but yeah, it's just like all these things, and it's just like, all right, forget it. Like I'm just gonna be who I'm gonna be, and like whatever. Like fuck it. I'm not gonna try to appease and, you know, cater to this gaze of like men or like patriarchy or society anymore because it's exhausting. Like who the fuck has time for that? Not me. And it's damaging to myself, my self-esteem, my body. Like fuck that. I'm good.
Yeah, one of my shitty boyfriends, we were talking about clothing or something, and I remember just being like, it's uncomfortable, like I don't want to wear that, it's uncomfortable. And he was like, so? And I'm like, bitch, are you ever uncomfortable 1 minute of your fucking life? Are you ever uncomfortable? No. So get away from me. But it was so clear that to him it was so normalized that like, yeah, like be uncomfortable, that doesn't matter. What matters is like how you look, you know? And that like, it's just, again, expected that like we're going to take pain into our bodies to meet everyone else's expectations and please them. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I definitely felt that with like all the like the male gaze and stuff. Like I remember like getting to a point, so like kind of, you know, I noticed like with like a lot of other Indian women, it's like once you hit that point in your life when you start wearing like saris, it's kind of like, oh, you're like a grown woman now because you're wearing like the big girl clothes and stuff. And I remember like I used to just like love the way I felt in saris, but I like when I went out to places, like I wanted to start wearing some that were just like more simple and more like comfortable, because I used to wear ones that had like a lot of sequins and a lot of like all this stuff. And, you know, because of like how I have to wear them, you know, they'll like poke into my stomach and I'd have like marks all over me and stuff. Like, and I was just like, you know what, I just want to wear a sari that's like comfortable and nice and like has a different kind of fabric. And my mom would get so mad at me because she would be like, no, like these kinds of saris are only for like old women, like you're young, you have a figure, you know, you should want to show that off. And I was like, no, I just want to be comfortable. And I feel like now, especially like embracing my bisexuality, I actually kind of like derive pleasure from like actively working against the male gaze. Like I normally have like I have like a baby face usually. Like if I'm not wearing any makeup, I literally look like a 14-year-old, like no joke at all. And like usually on days when I'd have like a test or something like that, I would always like, I'd like braid my hair into like 2 braids on the side and I wear like a cap backwards and I literally look like a small boy. And I remember just like looking at myself in the mirror one day and I was like, why do I kind of like this? I just was like, yes, like a man would find me very unattractive right now. And I like that.
Yeah. I get that too. Anytime I look like a little boy, I'm like, I'm the cutest little boy. And I'm just so happy all day. I just walk around being like, I'm the cutest little boy. Carrie said male gaze and male gaze always sound the same to me.
Same, Carrie.
So funny. Yeah, same. Yeah, getting away from the male gaze is like the most amazing thing. It's hard because you have to deal with their shit all the time, but it's like also amazing.
It's so freeing. Like,
It's so freeing.
nice to be able to like walk out the house wearing whatever the fuck, and it's just like, you know, before I would try to wear like, you know, baggy pants and a tight top, right? So you can at least see my boobs and like my waist, whatever. And then like, or a baggy top and like tight pants so you can see my ass. And like, now I'll wear baggy everything or like super fucking tight everything. And be like, just look my way, bitch, you know? But it's never for the male gaze.
Yes.
So it just feels so much better, but you're right. It takes a lot of, you know, working through shit to get through. But yeah, like, I'm good on looking good for a man. I'm like,
yeah,
I look good to you. Okay, let me go change.
You're like, fuck. Let me try this again.
I gave a man pleasure today. Oh, damn it.
And I think that's something that lockdown helped with a lot, because I think a lot of people experience what it's like to just be comfortable all day, and then we're like, maybe I actually have no interest in going back to being uncomfortable for other people. I know even for me, it's like I basically live in pajamas now, or like sweats now, and it's like my autistic ass is so happy. Are you kidding me? I get to just have like soft textures on my body all the time and like not be itchy and not be like in pain at all. It's amazing. And so even thinking about like getting a job, I'm like, I couldn't wear clothes again. You know?
Yes.
Like I barely get dressed for the live streams and that's about it. But it's like, I just think in so many ways people have actually gotten a taste of what it feels like to not have to carry all of that all the time. And I think with like body hair and just so many different things, I mean, there were so many people who shaved their head in lockdown for the first time, and that's like a thing they wanted to do. And I just think, yeah, like getting away from that is just so liberating and powerful. And I think that's why, you know, I know there's a push-pull right now, but I know that a lot of companies have been trying to bring people back in the office as like soon as they can, because they have to start reinforcing these things. Mm-hmm. Although I would be interested to see if dress codes got more casual after this, if this finally like pushed a lot of companies to have to be more casual. But I just think back when I had a job where I had to wear like professional attire, and I'm like,
I remember
you couldn't pay me enough
from previous days. So yeah,
yeah,
yikes. But
yeah.
No, the body hair thing like goes back to like vaginas being dirty and stuff. Like I remember it was supposed to be like fucking bald, which is like thinking of it now, like that's childlike and like kind of weird. Like now if that's what you like and you know you feel comfortable with, sure, but like when a partner is like imposing that on you, excuse me, it's like okay, like let's dig deeper here. Like why does it need to be like so smooth and whatever? And like I'm not gonna lie, like I paid money for fucking laser hair removal. I would get waxes and all this shit, and you have to deal with the ingrowns and all that. And like my partner now is like, I don't give a fuck. Like okay, like like it's listed, but like let me eat it. Like I don't care, you know. Like, but
yes.
So now being someone who also like enjoys vulvas and vaginas, I'm like, oh, I also don't care. So then that can make me feel more comfortable when someone else says, oh, they don't care.
Yeah.
Like, because I can feel that myself and be like, oh, wait, it really doesn't matter. So, anyways, also I just realized, so I set this up on my phone before, and I put my pronouns, and I set it up on my iPad, and I don't have them. So horrible. My pronouns are she, her. Okay. And they is also fine.
You're canceled.
Don't refer to me as
bye. Like,
yeah, you're out of here.
I know, right?
It's quite all right. That's the thing too. That's what's always been funny to me about, because I've talked at length about how I've had like very different experiences sleeping with different men, and found out in retroactively a woman, which looking back, I'm like, absolutely makes sense. Like our whole relationship was so wonderful and just like so open. With her actually, because this was like my high school partner, when I was like 15, 16, like little baby. And I shaved like completely because we were both like, tee, this is going to be sexy, you know? And I remember when I like got to her house and showed her, she was like, I hate that. Please don't ever do that again. And I was like, thank God, because I hate it too. Yeah, because I just, once I got out of the bath and I looked, I was like, I look like a little girl. Like, I was like, this is so weird. And I was so nervous because I'm like, if she really likes it, I'm going to be... Oh, like that's gonna make me feel bad, you know? Mm-hmm. And then she was like, I hate that, don't ever do it again. And I was like, whew, thank you. But anyway, I've also been with men who like genuinely don't care. And then there's men who do. And when they try to police me, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Do you know how deep someone's face has been in there when it's been like completely overgrown?
Thank you.
You think like once you've had that experience, you're like, you have no, like now I just look down on you because you're all fussy. And I don't want someone who's fussy being all up in my juicy vagina because it's a vagina. It's not something to be fussy about.
Like they're the big ones, like with the hairy ass balls. They want them in your mouth, and they want hair. I'm like, excuse me, like, are you gonna do something about that? Like, I don't care.
Excuse me.
Care about this? Like, you gonna manscape a little bit or what?
Oh yeah.
Or wash them, you know, something.
Let's start there with cleanliness at least.
Although to be fair to my exes, they were all very fastidious in the hygiene department, which actually was kind of annoying for me because I'm a little dirty. Not super dirty, but I'm like, I don't want to be like taking 2 showers a day. Get away from me with that.
No, fair.
I want to have like dirty morning sex, you know, where we both are just like stinky and fine with it.
Natural essence. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I do. And I want to go back. I think it was, let me see, I'm scrolling up. I think Keck and I think King Cyrus was also jumping in on this. We're saying like one of the biggest things to like epiphanies that they had was that realizing that you don't necessarily want to have sex with people unless you're like crazy about them. And I think that's so common for a lot of people. And I know I've talked about this before, but I just wanted to bring it up because I think Mohera, at least for you, that's kind of true. And just, it goes into that too. It's like, would I ever want to kiss someone who hadn't brushed their teeth yet? No. The thought of that makes me want to fucking vomit, because this ties into when we were talking about like genital repulsion too. But if I'm in love with someone and we wake up next to each other, I am like in their mouth before the alarm goes off, you know, like I don't care. I really don't care. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm just so obsessed with you. And I think like, if you're a person who's exploring your sexuality and you're having that genital repulsion, I think just remembering that can be really important. That like, yeah, philosophically, maybe it's not, it seems like something that you couldn't do, but then if you were actually in a space with someone where you were really, like, really into them and had those feelings for them, a lot of that would just go away.
I think the performative aspect falls away too, you know, when you have that deep connection. Yeah. Like, my spouse and I, like, we were best friends before, like, strictly platonic. And so all that bullshit of, like, you know, as much as we don't want to admit it, we do kind of, like, if we have something in common with someone that we're, like, interested in romantically or sexually, we're going to play it up, right? We're not going to be fake totally. It's like, oh my God, you love this, I love it too, you know? And just, like, talking about it all the time, like, wow, match made in heaven. But, like, when you're not trying to impress them, and, like, you're just trying to be friends and hang out, like, all that bullshit kind of falls away. And so a lot of pressure goes away, and I think that the connection can feel deeper and more organic, and you know, even the sex can be better because all that pressure is just kind of gone. It's like, okay, we know each other for who we are, the bullshit is gone, like, let's experience one another in this way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can be hard too because we never see queer sex. You know,
Oh my god, representation. Fuck.
Yes.
it does, and queer queer couples that aren't like neoliberal nightmares, right? Because
Oh, yes.
we see like the white gays all over the place. And you know, it's like, well, that's not what I want. Like that doesn't work for me either. But yeah, once I started watching those kind of like like soft porn romance movies on Netflix, like the lesbian ones, and the gay male ones too. But yeah, then it started to be like, okay, like this is so, because I remember even the first time I saw gay porn, I was like, oh, it's the same, you know, like. Sure, you might maybe be doing some different things, or there might be some different toys involved or whatever, but like, I was just like, oh, this is just two people like sharing their bodies with each other. And I just think we need that. And I think it's easy to forget that as you're on this journey, it's really important to watch that kind of stuff and just have that be normalized. Because I think for us, it's like, we know what's going to happen if we hook up with a dude, right? Like, we've been through that. We've seen it on TV a million fucking times. Like, you know the score. But I think like part of that possible repulsion and part of that fear is just like, you don't see that normalized in media of what it looks like for other people to fall in love or to fuck or to go on a date, you know? I remember thinking that one day, I was like, what would I talk to a girl about on a date? And it's like, bitch, like you have 500 female friends. What do you talk to them about, you know? But it was like, I did have this moment of like, oh my God, like what would we talk about? And it's like, I think it just, part of it's because you don't see that a lot. You don't see two women like having a crush on each other and like going on a date and like the process of them falling in love. You don't get to see that often. Like, so a lot of times when we do get like, say, lesbian representation, it's like, oh, this couple that's already together and they've been married for a long time and they just act like a heterosexual couple.
Yeah. I was thinking a lot too about like just the idea of like friendships and how like with like if it's like two girls or like friends, it's like, oh, they're just like besties, and it's like literally they're like, I would fucking die for you, and it's like, but we're just best friends. And it's like but then if it's like a guy and a girl, they're constantly like, oh, I know you're friends, but I'm sure there's something more. I'm sure there's something more. And it's like, if it's like the opposite gender, then it must be like something romantic. But if it's like two people of the same gender who are like really good friends, it's like, oh, nothing romantic could happen there. And I just remember, it's so weird, like I've been watching a lot of anime lately, and there's like a show with like all these like boys, and basically they're like paired up, and so like it's just like gay boys, like the whole show is just like they're all gay, they all come in like duos, and it's just like everybody pretty much who has like any common sense is like, even though they're not like gay, they're gay. Like, we all know they're gay. And it's just like, so people will have like all kinds of like fan fiction and like, you know, like headcanons about the two characters and stuff like that. And there'll always be these fucking assholes who come in the comments being like, stop trying to make everything gay. Stop trying to, like...
And you're like, everything is gay though.
You're like, dude, there is like legit evidence as to like why these two people are actually like romantically like attracted to each other. But then like, you just know that if it was like a guy and a girl or something like that, everybody would be like shipping the two characters together. And it's just like, you just see, even in things like media and things that are just like totally like imaginary and fake, it's like people still like feel this desire to be like heteronormativity. I'm like, even when it just literally makes no sense whatsoever.
It's so strong. You're right. Like, it's so pervasive. Like, fuck, guys. Like, I was just telling my spouse, like, yesterday that there's this guy in middle school, and, like, we were the only two black kids. So, like, he was a guy and I was a girl. So everyone's like, oh, should they? And I'm like, good, actually. Like, not into him, and, like, he was not into me. And, like, we were cool and everything. Like, I think he's a great guy. But, like, we were just not into it. And, like, because we're obviously a guy and a girl, right? And, like... you know, we're the only two black kids, like, we have to date, like, no, actually, like, No, thank you.
They're like, you two go off together, and then we'll keep being white over here.
Exactly.
And that will be great.
I'm just like, no.
That kind of happened on that show too. So everyone, I'm watching Are You the One season 8. And it's as messy, if not more so, than as advertised. But I'm watching it because it's the queer season. They had everyone in the house is sexually fluid, so it's like this everyone can be into each other kind of scenario. And I want to do a whole analysis of this because there's so much to unpack, but there's the queer Black person who's there who is identifies as gender fluid, and they were really into this basic white guy. I don't know why he's so basic. I'm like, baby, you could do so much better. But anyway, this basic white guy kept saying like, oh, I'm just really into like men who are men and women who are women, and like I don't really know what to do with all of this. So he goes to this gender fluid person and is like, oh, well, there's this other guy in the house who likes to wear dresses sometimes, like you two should be together. And this person was like, are you seriously doing this right now? Like, because we both like to dress femininely sometimes, like we should date. And it's just like, people don't know what to do with someone who doesn't fit this like extremely narrow definition of like the default, even when they're not even the majority of people. And it's really, I think it does make it really hard for you to picture something like that. Like, I don't know if you both saw ContraPoint's video about being gay, but she talked about that. Like, she really closed herself off from admitting that she was a lesbian because she's like, it just felt too, like, stereotypical. It just felt like too, you know, like too weird. Like I'm already a trans woman and then I'm also a lesbian, you know? And she was like, and I got so much validation from being a trans woman that men wanted to be with. Like that was very validating for my gender. And she talks about a lot of, I think that's actually where I heard CompHet for the first time was, and she said she fell in love with her best friend and her best friend like didn't reciprocate, but her best friend admitted that part of why is because she's also a trans woman and felt like it was too hard for her to fall in love with another trans woman. So it's like, this shit goes fucking deep, like very deep. And that's why this representation really matters. It really, really matters to see different variations. And that's why I hate a lot of queer representation in media, because it reinforces that, right? Like, how many times do you see a lesbian couple where they look like each other? And it's like,
Oh my God, yeah.
you know, it just reinforces this idea that like, yeah, that like, oh, you two are the same, so you go and you do the thing. And it's like, no, we need people who look all different sorts of ways. And that was something that like, for all of its massive flaws, and it has huge massive flaws, Sense8 is still one of my favorite shows, because like we meet a white trans woman with a black cis girlfriend, and they're like madly in love, and we get to see like two people together that we normally would not see together having this very healthy, loving, normal relationship.
Yes, that sex was hot. Like, that was hot. I was like...
I don't know how you come out of that straight. I really don't.
I know. That whole show was just like hot gay sex, and I was like... Ooh.
Like, yes, please. All right, ladies. Well, we've hit more than an hour and a half. So do either of you have any closing thoughts, topics, sentences you want to say? Why are they so weird? I feel my cramps, like, despite having taken Tylenol, they're like creeping up, and it's sucking out my brain energy. But yeah, do you have any kind of closing things or stuff we didn't get to yet that you'd like to talk about before the after party?
I'm gonna check my notes because I am ADHD.
Oh, please do.
Like whipping out.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think like, you know, I always had this mindset, like even like when I was like straight, I was like, oh, you know, but if I ever like fell for a woman, I mean, I'd be totally fine with that. And like, I mean, that'd be cool, you know? And
Same.
and so I think it's just like, you know, this like I remember thinking to myself one day, and this was kind of like my epiphany moment, was just like, if I was just with like a group of random people and we were like born on an island, like isolated from society, and nobody told us like what to do, I was like, I don't think I would be just straight, like, you know, and because it's like nobody's telling you like, oh, like the men have to be with the women or anything like that. And I think just like actively trying to like unlearn these like social constructs, and then because it's really hard like when you've been conditioned in something, you don't really know like, is this genuinely how I am, or is this like society's conditioning that's like made me this way? And it's like it's really hard to discern between those two. But I think just actively trying to unlearn this stuff and then try to get to a point where you can be like, who am I myself apart from like the conditions of my surroundings? I think that was just like the biggest thing that helped me understand like my sexuality and like my attraction to like different genders and stuff.
So I did hit all my notes, but for the representation part, like, especially being a Black woman, like there's a whole cultural component too. So like even when Black people are not religious, it's like, oh, like you're gay, like, oh, like the breakdown of the Black family, like this is what's wrong. I'm like, bitch, no, it's fucking mass incarceration and over policing of our neighborhoods. Like, it's literally not being gay. Like, what about when a gay couple adopts a Black child, like a Black gay couple? You know what I mean? Like, again, the nothing. So like, I don't know, seeing that later on, like I never saw like a Black lesbian couple or like a Black non-binary person. Like even when I realized like what non-binary was or like trans was, like I was like, well, I don't know anyone who's trans or like non-binary. Like, bitch, yeah, you do. Just aren't listening. That's your cis privilege in your fucking brain, like not acknowledging things or not digging deeper, you know? And so, I don't know, the representation, it does do a lot. Like you were saying, how people are like, oh, you know, this couple looks the same, this and that. And like, I remember vaguely seeing like an ad or something like for the L Word when I was younger, and I was like, ooh, like what's that, you know? And so I looked it up and it's like, oh, lesbian. And so full circle, my spouse now is like, oh, when I watched the L Word in 6th grade, I was like, yep, definitely gay, like lesbian. But then like, you know, so now they're like taking testosterone or whatever, and so they were talking about, you know, us being married, and someone overheard, and they were like, oh, like how is it working with your husband? I was like, do not perceive me as heterosexual. Like, I am not straight. We are very gay.
I hear that from so many queer couples where they're like, don't read us as straight. It's like,
please don't.
I'm gonna get a rainbow tattooed on my forehead so everyone knows.
Literally.
Not straight.
Not straight.
We took our American flag down and we're going to put a pride flag up and a black
yes.
Yeah.
Literally, we had a friend come over. He's like really tall. I was like on his shoulders, and then I pulled it out like victory.
Enjoyed today's live stream replay? Come join the after party. Go to patreon.com/pinkspots to get access to the after party playlist, where my guests and I continue the conversation in a more relaxed atmosphere. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Make sure to click that bell for notifications so you never miss a thing. Leave a comment below, and if you're not sure what to say, then just leave your favorite emoji. This keeps my evil overlord, the YouTube algorithm, well-fed and happy. Thanks to my Patreon supporters. Your donations help this disabled queer anarchist live a self-directed life, and that is pretty damn cool. If you can't afford Patreon, or you just want another connection to the Pink Spots community, join us over on Discord, link in the description box below. Alright, Pinkos, see you on the next one.